training. Some of the topics we're going to cover today is images, tables, iframes, forms, and touch a little bit on Bootstrap. And this is a new format than what I've done over the past 2 or 3 videos. I found a little program that runs off of JavaScript, and it makes sort of like a PowerPoint type presentation, but without all the bells and whistles. And everything has to be coded in here. So on the left side, what you're going to see in most cases is the result. And then on the right side, it's going to show you how I have achieved that result. I didn't really have to show you this part, but it does kind of touch on some of the things that we've talked about so far. Like the styling. This is inline styling that I'm using here versus a CSS sheet. Then we have the H1, which is going to give you the biggest of the H series. You have H1 through H6. H1 being the header, give you the largest text. We're going with an ordered list. And I had mentioned this in the last training. You can change the type of your ordered list. In this case, I just went ahead with Roman numerals, the smaller Roman numerals. But you can change what it's going to look, whether it be numbers or larger Roman numerals, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or capital alphabet. And then each one of these is a list item. So for each one of these, we have a list item on the side, and then we close our OL, we close our H1, and we close our div. So on the images, what I'm showing here is the natural width with no CSS, and that's the image source is internal. If you look here to the right, this happens to be at move back one directory, and then go into images, and then the file name, maxscapebadge.png. Same thing with the next one. It's an internal image source, and I just changed the width to 150 pixels. Now, normally, when you change the width, the height will follow. It's not that way in 100% of the cases, but normally it will be. Or you can hard set it, like here on the third one. I just wanted to show you where the width is set to 150, and I set the height to 200 pixels, no CSS on any of these. This is just how you would change it directly in the image. Now, you can use CSS to do the same thing, but I just wanted to show you. And in the note here, I put use external links with discretion. That's because if I'm linked over to another website and then somebody changes that image or they delete that image or whatever, then obviously it's not going to show up or not show up properly on my site. The other thing I'd like to point out is if you're running a website where you're selling advertising or displaying advertising or whatever, and you find a 125 by 125 banner, don't try to put it on the site as a 468 by 60 banner, because then it's going to just stretch it out. It's going to shrink it in height, and then it's going to stretch it in width. Same thing if you have a 468 by 60, and then you put it to a 125 and a 125, now it's going to stretch it in height and squeeze it in width, kind of sort of like this bottom one here. So whatever proportions that you're using within your image, you want to use as close as the same settings that you can get. Like, for example, if this is 100 by 100 or 125 by 125 here, then using a 150 by 150, you can see it kind of turns out nice. Now, if I got a little bit bigger, you can see here it's just starting to get a little blurry. And as I get a little bit bigger, it's going to get a little blurrier and blurrier. There's ways around that by using different formats of images and that sort of thing, but that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. This will show you how to wrap text around your image just by doing it normally. And I put a border around here on purpose to show you the difference. But you can set your border, like for example here, set your border to 0 pixels. That'll go away. But as it says, this text does not want to play nice in the same sandbox with the image. When the text wraps, it starts a new line under the image. But then when we go to and we set the float to left on the image here, and I set a margin of 15 pixels on the right, and you can see the margin here between the line and where the text is. That's where the margin is going to be. And because I did a float right, it's going to float the text to the right-hand side, and it does want to play nice in the same sandbox. It flows nicely when the text wraps, blah, blah, blah. You guys can read. And then if I wanted an additional, like I have here, the 15, if I wanted a margin across the bottom, I could put margin dash bottom colon 15 .px or whatever I wanted to set it to. Now, if I wanted a margin all the way around it, I only have to set this once. I would just put margin colon 15 pixels, and it's going to put a margin all the way around. You can also have top and bottom and left and right. So let's say top is maybe 5, bottom is 5, and left and right are 10. You don't have to spell it all out. Margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left. The way that this works is it starts with the top margin, goes to the right, goes to the bottom, goes to the left. So it kind of goes in a clockwise fashion starting at the top. So if I put like margin 1010 or margin 1015, it'll be 10, 15, 10, 15 as it goes around. So if there's any confusion there, you don't understand that and you want to use it, either ask me or just look it up on Google. The bottom one here, what I'm showing here is padding, and I have padding left versus margin, setting the margin. And you can see here, that's going to pad around the image itself. So as you can see here, this is outside the image, and this is inside the border. But it's kind of the same thing. Also plays nicely in the same sandbox. You're going to use a float right to float the text to the right. I'm also showing here an opacity. You can set the opacity, and that's just what I did here. I just happened to put it at 0.6. 1 is 100%, means it's going to show up like these other two images. The default is going to be 1, and then when you go to 0.9, 8, 7, 6, and on down, it's going to fade more and more and more. As far as background images, you can't take a background image and directly apply opacity to it. You got to do a little CSS tricks there too. And I noted again, use external links with discretion. What I want to show here is, if you look at these top 3 images, the way that they're laid out, 1, 2, 3, is the way their stacking order is going to be, and that's called z-index. So if you think of like a map, and you have north, south, east, and west. So your east and west is going to be your x-axis. Your north and south is going to be the y. And the z, let's just say you're looking down on the map, and you're looking at a skyscraper, and you have or a cityscape, but you're looking down on it. You're going to have some buildings that are taller than others. That's the z-index. The higher the number, the higher the building, if you will. But its default, as they're put in order, is going to be how the stacking is. What I'm also doing here is I'm showing you some positioning, and the positions, there's actually 4 different types. There's absolute, relative, and fixed, and the other one is called static. The 2 that I use the most really are absolute and relative. Absolute is going to take from the 0 up here in the corner of your browser window. Here I have left 350, so it's going to come in 350 pixels, and then I have top 200. That means it's going to come down by 200 pixels, and you'll see that here. Position, absolute, left 350, top 200. Then what I'm doing is, off of that, I'm taking a relative position. Now I could have positioned this absolutely as well, but I just wanted to show you the relative position is 20 pix by 60 pix to just drop that down and over. And then I did a fixed position of 530 and 320 to put that one here. Now I wanted to show you the difference. Let me just kind of go over the next section first, and then I want to show you something. As far as the stacking order, as I said, it's defaulted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But what I've done here is I changed the stacking order. I purposely put this text here and purposely put these images in the same order. But you can see here I have a z-index. There's a z-index of 15. And then down here I have a z-index of 10. So you're like, well, why would you do that? This is just for the purpose of demonstration, is the number being higher, that's what's showing this text, this H4 text. That's at 15, so that's closer to you. Then the next one way down here is at 10. That's a little bit further away. And then these are going to, the other two in the background are going to be at 0 or as stacked. So I'm just showing you don't have to like put them in order and then go, oh, now I need to fix my z-indexing and that sort of thing. You could put them in any order you want and then change your z-indexing accordingly of how you want it to look. And then something that's new that we haven't learned, and how I got this highlighting, is I use the tag called mark. And then I changed the background color. And again, we haven't gone over this type of coloring yet, the RGBA. And what this is the R red, G green, B blue, and the A is what's called alpha, which gives your transparency. And I actually have this wrong in the demo over here. This should actually say RGBA, but we have learned HTML color names. So for example, dark red, the same hexadecimal value is going to be this. In this case, AB0000. We can use an RGB or red, green, blue value of setting the red to 139, and then the other two to 0, and then to set the opacity, same thing to get the same color, and then a 0.06 in this case for the alpha channel. I'll just give you a second to look that over. There's a lot of information. You can always go back and look at the video. Next thing I want to talk about is tables. Before HTML5 came out, tables were a common way to achieve the desired look and feel of a website. Tables still find their way in today's web development, but their use is discouraged. HTML5, we use different things like div, span, aside, section, article, that sort of thing. And we'll get into that way later when we get into more in-depth with HTML. But as far as a table, you have a row, you have a column, so each one of these is going to be a column, and then you have a cell, so each one of these is going to be a cell. So you have row, column, and then each one is a cell. Here's your row, here's another row, here's the columns, and then in this case, first name is going to be a cell, last name is going to be another cell, username is going to be another cell. Now what we've used up here is called a caption. To build a table, it's going to start out with the keyword table. And then you don't have to, you can use the word caption, the tag caption, to put whatever caption you want. And if you look up above in the CSS section, this is how I'm styling my caption. I'm allowing it to be displayed, I'm aligning it center, and I'm changing my font size to whatever I want it to be. And the color is black. Then here we have the table header, table head, T-head, tag, which is going to set up this part of the table here. You want to start a new row with the tag of TR. And since we're doing a table head, we use the TH and close TH, and that'll open the cell and close the cell. Here again, we open, close, and then we close that row. So we've now completed this row of the table. And then in the table body, we're going to open a row. open a cell with TD, close it with TD. I just call that like table data, table row, table data, table row, table head, table row, table data. Each cell is going to open with the TD and close with the TD until you get done with that row. Close your body, close your table, and in this case I have a div centered, div centered. Now some of the styling that I used, we talked about using the CSS inline, we talked about using the style that's in the head section of the HTML file, but we also talked about it being on a CSS style sheet, which is it's a separate file that you call in the head section of the HTML file. So I'm setting my table. That means any table within my website that uses this particular style sheet will have these parameters. Same thing with this div centered. And let me back up for just a second. The div dot centered means if it's a div and it has the class of centered, then it's going to use this whatever's in between the brackets. If you remember too, we had last week, we talked about the tag, the way to call out your CSS, the tag, the ID, or the class. And to call out a class, to call out a tag, it's just the tag. Like here we have a table tag, caption tag, table data, table header tag. Whereas we don't have any IDs set up in here, but we do have one class, and so therefore we use the dot centered. I could do a dot, I could just do a div, text align center, come down here and do a dot centered for the class, but then just repeat this, but that'd be kind of pointless. And then what I've done here is I've set up just a little simple thing in the table. Border collapse means, if you look here, this is with the border separated. If I did not collapse this border, then what I'd have is I'd have a border around this cell and another border around this cell and this cell, which means that these lines here would be thicker because it's going to be two pieces of the one border for this side, one border for this side, and they're going to butt up against each other. This is 1 pixel wide. So in that case, if I didn't collapse them, it would be 2 pixels wide. Same thing here between this row and this row. Same thing. If I didn't collapse it, I'd have a thicker line here. And then just to kind of give you an example here, I'm not using border collapse, and I'm using border separate. I can do it either way, border initial or border separate. And then I'm putting 5 pixels in between each cell, each row, each so on and so forth. One of the things I'm wanting to override what's in the CSS style sheet. This is higher up in the hierarchy, and I want to override it. So I'm going to use the word important. You put an exclamation point with the word important. And that doesn't always work, but the majority of the time it will. It'll override what's in the CSS style sheet. So we have table, opening, closing, caption, opening, closing, optional, table head, closing table head, table row, closing table row, TH to open the cell, close the TH, so on and so forth. When you get into the body, table row to open the row, close your row, and then each cell is going to be TD open, TD close. Next, we'll talk about iFrames, but it's saying you can embed other pages, etc., from your site and from another source outside of your site. This is an iframe, so it's like a window, a portal, looking at another site. And all I'm doing here is CSS styling, in this case, the width of 98%. Now, that's 98% of this part of this window, because this is divided 50-50. So I wanted just to have a little bit of border here to make it look nice. And then to set the vertical height, I set it to 140. to get this. So I'm opening up that big picture window. And then the way that I'm calling that is HTTP iframe source equals http://maxscape.com/offertest.html, and then just close the iframe. I'm putting it into the div of centered, in this case text align center. So div.centered, which is a class, div, the tag, class, centered. Another thing I wanted to show you is, in order to achieve this with the line through, this is an example of what we learned, I believe, last week. One of the tags that you can use to do that is del or delete, which is used to get the strike through. And then I can put the non-strike through. And yes, this is my shameless promo. That's one example of an iframe. Another thing is you can resize the contents of the iframe. So like when we come back here, you can see it's kind of big and the text kind of pushes the envelope there just a little bit. And even though this is a little bit small for you to read, just kind of zoom in on it a little bit, you can see it fits a lot better. Now I can adjust some of these values in here to make sure I'm back to actual size. I can adjust some of these values in here to make this a little bit bigger to bring it out. Let's say I wanted this to be here. You know, this white box, I want it to be wider. I could just kind of keep blowing it up. But it's same thing, I'm using div centered. You're going to see this a lot. Div center, text align center. And then the iframe itself, I'm setting to a width of 98%, just like on the last screen. And I put the height at 70, vertical height, just to kind of show you the difference. This was 140, this was 70. So you can see the size difference there. And then I created a div ID of container frame, and notice how I'm calling that out with a pound sign, because it's an ID. A dot is class, pound is the ID, and with nothing in front of it means it's just the tag. And I'm just putting a border around it, changing the border color to black, making the margin auto, which means on the left side, the right side, the top and the bottom, it's going to be automatic, just however it falls within the browser. Overflow hidden, what that means is the scroll bars, if this was too large for this window, you make it a scroll bar, and what that's going to do is hide that. So the person wouldn't see those bars and make it look ugly and be able to scroll. And then I put the width to 200% because that's what it needed. If I set it to 100%, for some reason it would only put it, the window would only be like this big. So I had to put it to 200% to get it all the way across. And then in here, I have ID container frame, and then I also have the tag iframe. So that means it's going to apply to both. You got to have both container frame and the iframe tag to get all of this stuff. Now the magic where it zooms out is I'm setting the scale to 0.5. So half the size of what this was is what this should be. About half the size. And that's going to be based on a lot of these different parameters. You just got to tweak to get it to look right. I had to set the margin top to be 185 pixels to the negative, because with this part of the box was actually sitting down here. So this pushes it up the screen. So your margin top can be a negative number, margin left, margin right, margin bottom can be negative or positive. I also had to bring the margin left 27%. It's because of the formatting that I had to use that was used within this slideshow program, as I had to kind of tweak things just to get it to look right within the window, within the window, within the window. So that's why you see all that. But the key part here to get that is the scale set to whatever, 0.5, 0.6. If I go 0.6, that means it's going to be bigger. So if it's like 60%, if I went to 0.4, it'd be like 40%, it'd be even smaller. One way to use this will be on the LFM offer page, set it up an admin on each of your sites as an iframe. You would only have to change this file once. So I could have 10 different sites, which I'm getting pretty doggone close to that, and have the same offer set up on every single site, but I only have to come in and change this file once. Now, since I mentioned the LFM suite, you would have to go in and change if the pricing changed, you would have to go change your IPN. But again, if that's something you want to do, just get with me. I got it all figured out. And another example of an iframe. Here I have my custom promo calendar plugin for the LFM-TE and LFM-VM. Pulls data from the promo tables and automatically populates the calendar. Each one of these, when you click it, comes up with a pop-up. We'll learn how to do that way later in the lesson as I start teaching you more and more, but this is actually done with JavaScript and jQuery. And yes, this is another shameless promo. That's one of my plugins that I created. But all the parameters here are pretty much the same as what we went over in the last video, the last slide. Now, the one thing I didn't mention is this part. You see each one of these has a different, that's for the different browsers because it's not supported in the same exact way for each browser, so you have to tell it. If you're using this browser, use this. If you're using this browser, use that, because each browser is also going to act a little bit differently. What's 0.5 to 1 might show up differently than the other. So let's say you're using Firefox, and it might have a certain look in Firefox, and then when you go to Chrome, it has a different look. So you can just kind of tweak those values per browser. And then another things, YouTube video. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of this, and all I'm doing is I'm just putting the iframe source. I'm putting the YouTube video information here. Now I do have this on the right side, the code showing autoplay as 1. What happened with this particular script, because of the way it's laid out, that when I loaded it and it came up with that main page, this video actually started playing. So it did autoplay. Question mark autoplay after whatever the file is that's being called, question mark autoplay equals 1, and REL, which is any related videos, I wanted that to set to 0. So if there's something that's kind of related to this, I don't want that to show. If you notice when you watch a YouTube video and then it comes up with when it's done, it usually comes up with a grid of other videos that they feel that is related. This will come up with nothing. So if I were to load this on my website, it's going to automatically play. We'll give that a second. I don't know if you can hear that because I didn't turn my audio feed through. And like I said, I'm not sure if the audio came through because I know there's a setting on here that when you do this, you got to enable computer. I think when you do the share screen, you got to enable the audio. But this video is available for promoting the Maxscape.com website, and you can access that in the affiliate toolbox, but this is what the link is going to look like, and then it's going to be whatever your referral ID is. And why do you need a referral ID from Maxscape.com if learning is free? Well, the learning is free, but as the site starts to grow and we start to get more and more people visiting the website, then I'll probably start selling banner ads. Maybe if I keep it as a TE, I'm still not sure what I want to do there. But we'll probably sell ads on there so we can keep it free. Yes, another shameless promo. Forms. You've all seen them. Login forms, you name it, you've seen them. But they're used to collect information from users on the client side. The client side being the person that is sitting in front of their computer. The server side is what's on the internet. Client side is the client. Information is usually sent back to the server side and processed. Forms can be used with JavaScript to perform certain features, including form validation. So you might, on the client side, you might set it up with JavaScript because actually JavaScript is ran on the client side. you may set that up to where when you go maybe from field to field, it's going to look and say, okay, they're putting in their first name. Do they have at least 3 letters or 2 letters or whatever? If not, you can have it do something. Have it not allow them to come out of that box, have them change the color of the box, put up an error message, whatever. That's normally done with JavaScript, and it can be validated prior to going to the server. But forms contain elements such as text field, input elements, text. Oh, I have text fields twice. So that means it can receive text fields, check boxes, radio buttons, submit buttons, select box, drop down lists, and more. So here's an example of a form. Now, why is this form way down here? Because this was kind of starting to get a little bit long, and when I scrolled down, I wanted you to be able to see what the HTML looked like. So I put a note here, CSS styling margin top 35%. That was used to move this form down to make it more visible when scrolling to view the HTML. So one of the reasons that I put these notes in here to show you how I'm doing things, it may not directly apply to the lesson itself, because the more I repeat things to you and the more you see them and you hear them until you get sick of them, when you start getting sick of them, you probably have learned them, hopefully. So what we've seen up until this point on the CSS was everything kind of laid out nice and neat. You can also kind of shorten that. This is the same thing as breaking it out and indenting and all that nice, neat stuff. It does make your code more readable when you look at it this way. So as you're developing, you might want to kind of keep it that way. And then what you can do is you can put it through a minifier. And that last that I showed you, or even this, you run it through a minifier. This is the same thing. It's just basically taking out all the spaces and everything. So you might want to have your main CSS style sheet or sheets called whatever.css. Then when you minify them, styles.min.css, and link to that one. So work from your .css file, run it through a minifier, which is going to take out all the spaces. And that's what it will end up looking like. This is exactly the same as this. But to show you on the form, again, I'm using a caption inside of a table. Can you use a caption inside of a form? No, not unless you're using a table. And the reason I'm using a table is to just kind of show you I can do this with, and I'll probably show you next week, how to lay this form out better and make it more HTML5 looking. But this is the quickest way to kind of show you the basics of how a form is set up. So in this case, I have the name, and that's just the label here. The input type, say I have table row, table data, close table data, table row to get that cell and then that row. But we won't go over the table part again. I don't want to bore you to death on that because I think I did enough repetition on the actual table itself. But in order to get this part where they would enter whatever, it's input type equals text. And I'm going to name it name because I'm asking for the name. Name, ID, that sort of thing, that's for when the form gets processed, whether it's on the JavaScript client side or whatever your server-side language is. In the case of LFM, it's PHP. So this would get sent over to the server when I hit submit, and then processed on the PHP side. And let me back up because I skipped this part. To open a form, form method equals post. You can also use the get method. I'll explain those in just a second. In this case, action equals the pound key. And that means it's just going to, if I were to click submit, it would just resubmit the form within this page. And then the ID of this is form. That can be used in several different ways. The post method means all of this stuff is going to get sent to the server, as whatever the link is. So let's say if I was doing this and I called it action equals processme.php, then all it's going to do is send this silently, and your link up top is just going to say whatever, whatever, whatever slash processme.php. If I use the get method, it's going to add everything in each one of these fields and send that as one long link. Kind of like that YouTube link with the question mark, and then anything after that is going to be ampersand, whatever, ampersand, whatever. So this would be processme.php, question mark name, ampersand email, which is what would get sent to the server. For those of you who are familiar with the LFM, when someone uses your referral ID, it's going to say whatever your site name is, .com, .biz, or whatever, slash question mark RID equals, and then whatever the referral ID number is. That's actually send it over as a get method. We'll get more into that when we learn more about PHP. But just know that there's two ways that you can send your data, post and get. Down here I have a text area, and I'm setting the columns to 30, rows to 10. So my columns across this way is going to be 30, and then down this way is going to be 10. I set the style padding is 5 pixels, border is 1, border color is CCC, whatever that equates to be, that light gray color. Max width is going to be 500 pixels. And then I have a submit button. No particular styling on the submit button. And next gets a little more HTML5 and a little more Bootstrap. The way I call Bootstrap in here is through the CDN, which is the Content Delivery Network. All I did was Google, and I said Bootstrap CDN. It took me to a website, and it actually gave me what I need to put into the head section of my HTML file. And that happens to be that. And in this case, you can see that they're using the bootstrap.min.css file. So it's going to be all crammed together, just like I showed you on the last screen. And then here, I'm just showing a more compact way because I wanted to just show you the input width of 275. That's how I got this input field to be that size. So if I wanted all my input fields to match, I could change the CSS to be whatever I wanted the max. So let's say I have last name, and I'm expecting that to be at least 30 characters, and I have the username, and I'm expecting that to be maybe 50 characters, for example, but I want the two to match. So I can put in here that the width is going to be 275 pixels or whatever, and that's going to apply to all of the input fields to make them all the same width. And then again, the border is 1 pixel solid CCC, which is going to be that light gray color. And then I'm setting the height to 20 pixels. So you can change the height of your input field too. What I've done here that's different than the other form, and I forgot to drop this down, but if you look here where it says enter your username, enter your password, if I just go into this field, that's where I'm going to enter my username, and if I start typing in, that's wording is going to go away. So that's like a prompt. In this case, it's called placeholder to let people know what you're expecting. I mean, it's pretty obvious: username, enter your username, password, enter your password. But I'm just saying, if you have something that's in there, or you just want to make it, you know, look nice, you can use that placeholder. Or if it's something that's kind of ambiguous, you don't want to have them figure it out. So here again, I use the table, caption, table row, table data, and I'm just showing you here, instead of spreading it out and spacing it, I'll just put everything here on one line for each row. Same thing if I were to space that out. Just kind of showing you a different way to do it. Now, one of the reasons that I broke this out here was I wanted to show you how to create a button in Bootstrap. And in this case, button, the type is submit, which is going to be just like it was in the other one. The name, I'm just calling it submit. But the class, and this is pulled from the Bootstrap min.css file, the class is going to be a button, button success, and then I wanted a small button. And the value is submit. So like where the form processing might come into play is I said if this is set, if this value is set to submit, then submit. If the value is set to reset, then reset. And then you would have your code in there to what does a submit mean and what does a reset mean. So you kind of put your code on whatever form you're using, format you're using to process this particular form. And then the same kind of styling that I had before, pretty much. Up here, table data, table header, which is going to be the tag, the caption, a tag, table, a tag, div, dot centered, that sort of thing. Now in here, if I just put in something, and then I'm going to put in my password, and my password is 123456, you can see that's where the dots come from. But I want to reset that because JKGF is not my name and that's not my real password, so I'm going to reset it. You see how that just reset. The way that I got that, and actually I forgot to show it in this form. Yeah, you're going to use input type text name is whatever, and then skip a space and put placeholder, all one word, equals quote whatever you want it to say, close quote. So placeholder equals quote whatever text, close quote. And that's how you're going to get that placeholder to fill. I just forgot to show it in the example. Apologies. Some examples of the Bootstrap buttons. And again, I'm just showing here the same thing I was showing you before with the CDN, Content Delivery Network. And no CSS required, but the buttons can be styled. But here we have the class button default, primary, success, info, warning, danger, and link. And I'm looking at the right side of these values here. So class equals button, and then button default, button primary, button success, info, warning, danger, link. And that's going to give you here default, primary, success, info, warning, danger, and then that's what a link, quote unquote, button is going to look like. Then you can change the text on the button. If I wanted that to say something else like submit or click me or whatever, that's where I would do it, in between, outside of the actual opening and closing tags. Now the other one's got a good drink. And thanks for plugging in. That's about it for this week. I'm going to